Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/Brian E. Denton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated. Today's reading and reflection is on chapter 163. Chapter 163. That same evening, Pierre went to the Rostovs to fulfill the commission entrusted to him. Natasha was in bed, the Count at the club, and Pierre, after giving the letters to Sonia, went to Maria Dmitrievna, who was interested to know how Prince Andrew had taken the news. 10 minutes later, Sonia came to Maria Dmitrievna. "Natasha insists on seeing Count Peter Kirillovich," said she. "But how? Are we to take him up to her? The room there has not been tidied up." "No, she is dressed and gone into the drawing-room," said Sonia. Maria Dmitrievna only shrugged her shoulders. "When will her mother come? She has worried me to death. Now mind, don't tell her everything," said she to Pierre. "One hasn't the heart to scold her. She's so much to be pitied, so much to be pitied." Natasha was standing in the middle of the drawing-room, emaciated, with a pale, set face, but not at all shamefaced as Pierre expected to find her. When he appeared at the door, she grew flurried, evidently undecided whether to go to meet him or to wait till he came up. Pierre hastened to her. He thought she would give him her hand as usual, but she, stepping up to him, stopped, breathing heavily, her arms hanging lifelessly just in the pose she used to stand in when she went to the middle of the ballroom to sing, but with quite a different expression of face. "Peter Kirillovich," she began rapidly, "Prince Bolkonsky was your friend, is your friend," she corrected herself. It seemed to her that everything that had once been must now be different. "He told me once to apply to you." Pierre sniffed as he looked at her, but did not speak. Till then, he had reproached her in his heart, and tried to despise her. But he now felt so sorry for her that there was no room in his soul for reproach. "He is here now. Tell him to forgive me." She stopped and breathed still more quickly, but did not shed tears. "Yes, I will tell him," answered Pierre. But he did not know what to say. Natasha was evidently dismayed at the thought of what he might think about what she had meant. "No, I know all is over," she said hurriedly. "No, that can never be. I'm only tormented by the wrong I have done him. Tell him only that I beg him to forgive. Forgive me for everything." She trembled all over and sat down on a chair. A sense of pity he had never known before overflowed Pierre's heart. "I will tell him. I will tell him everything once more," said Pierre. "But I should like to know one thing." "Know what?" Natasha's eyes asked. "I should like to know, did you love—" Pierre did not know how to refer to Anatoly, and flushed at the thought of him. "Did you love that bad man?" "Don't call him bad," said Natasha. "But I don't know at all." She began to cry. And a still greater sense of pity, tenderness, and love welled up in Pierre. He felt the tears trickle under his spectacles, and hoped they would not be noticed. "We won't speak of it any more, my dear," said Pierre, and his gentle, cordial tone suddenly seemed very strange to Natasha. "We won't speak of it, my dear. I'll tell him everything. But one thing I beg of you. Consider me your friend. And if you want help, advice, or simply to open your heart to someone, not now, but when your mind is clear, think of me." He took her hand and kissed it. "I shall be happy if it's in my power. Pierre grew confused. "Don't speak to me like that. I am not worth it," exclaimed Natasha, and turned to leave the room, but Pierre held her hand. He knew he had something more to say to her, but when he said it, he was amazed at his own words. "Stop, stop. You have your whole life before you," said he to her. "Before me? No, all is over for me," she replied, with shame and self-abasement. "All over," he repeated. "If I were not myself, but the handsomest, cleverest, and best man in the world, and were free, I would this very moment ask on my knees for your hand and your love." For the first time for many days, Natasha wept tears of gratitude and tenderness, and glancing at Pierre, she went out of the room. Pierre, too, when she had almost run into the anteroom, restraining tears of tenderness and joy that choked him, and without finding the sleeves of his fur cloak, threw it on and got into his sleigh. "Where to now, Your Excellency?" asked the coachman. "Where to?" Pierre asked himself. "Where can I go now? Surely not to the club or to pay calls." All men seemed so pitiful, so poor, in comparison with this feeling of tenderness and love he experienced, in comparison with that softened, grateful last look she had given him through her tears. "Home," said Pierre, and despite 22 degrees of frost Fahrenheit, he threw open the bearskin cloak from his broad chest and inhaled the air with joy. It was clear and frosty. Above the dirty, ill-lit streets, above the black roofs, stretched the dark, starry sky. Only looking up at the sky did Pierre cease to feel how sordid and humiliating were all mundane things compared with the heights to which his soul had just been raised. At the entrance to the Arbit Square, an immense expanse of dark, starry sky presented itself to his eyes. Almost in the center of it, surrounded and sprinkled on all sides by stars, but distinguished from them by its nearness to the earth, with its white light, and its long uplifted tail, shone the enormous and brilliant comet of 1812. The comet which was said to portend all kinds of woes and the end of the world. In Pierre, however, that comet, with its long luminous tail, aroused no feeling of fear. On the contrary, he gazed joyfully, his eyes moist with tears, at this bright comet, which, having traveled in its orbit with inconceivable velocity through immeasurable space, seemed suddenly, like an arrow piercing the earth, to remain fixed in a chosen spot, vigorously holding its tail erect, shining and displaying its white light amid countless other scintillating stars. It seemed to Pierre that this comet fully responded to what was passing in his own softened and uplifted soul, now blossoming into a new life. All right, that concludes my reading of chapter 163. I hope you enjoyed it. I will now proceed to my reflection on the same. A Year of War and Peace, day 163. All you need is love. Sometimes suffering advances the mind and spirit. In Woody Allen's classic Hannah and Her Sisters, a character named Mickey, played by Allen, goes to the doctor to complain of hearing loss. The doctor finds something odd and requests to have Mickey see a specialist. Mickey, notorious hypochondriac, believes that he has had a brain tumor. He falls into a severe depression. He seeks solace in religion and philosophy. He sees the rabbi, he consults with the Catholic priest, he even talks at the Hare Krishnas. His search, however, fails to find a calming balm for the terrors of mortality. Dejected, he takes a long autumn walk through an overcast, rain-swept Manhattan. Millions of books written on every conceivable subject by all these great minds, and in the end, none of them knows anything more than I do about the big questions to life, he muses. Maybe the poets are right, he concludes. Maybe love is the only answer. It turns out that the poets are right. Love is the only answer. Mickey finds selfless love with Holly, his ex-wife's sister. This is, after all, a Woody Allen film. And despite the familiar Allen-esque pessimism of the preceding 90 minutes, Hannah and Her Sisters ends on a joyous and optimistic note as Mickey and Holly embrace at a family Thanksgiving party, having just learned that Holly is pregnant. Pierre Bezukhov and Mickey are pretty much the same character. Both are men driven by a desire to find answers to the big questions of life. Both, in their studious search, come up short. In the end, Mickey finds love with Holly. We haven't even reached the midpoint of War and Peace yet, but in today's chapter it is hinted that perhaps Pierre might find love with Natasha. He has returned to the Rostovs once again to fulfill his promise to Prince Andrew that he return some of Natasha's personal items. While there, Natasha insists on speaking to him. She asks him to please apologize to Andrew for her and beg his forgiveness. She feels terribly guilty, and though she understands no reconciliation is possible, she hopes Andrew can find it in her heart to forgive her. Something moves inside Pierre. As Natasha cries, a still greater sense of pity, tenderness, and love welled up in Pierre. At one point, he even kind of proposes marriage. Natasha isn't receptive to that sentiment, not yet anyway, and she flees the room. But Pierre is ennobled by this meeting. He leaves the Rostov house and takes a ponderous walk through the nighttime streets of Moscow, thinking of Natasha, where now, quote, all men seem so pitiful, so poor, in comparison with this feeling of tenderness and love he experienced, in comparison with that softened, grateful last look she had given him through her tears, end quote. Pierre's walk through Moscow in our novel, like Mickey's through Manhattan in the film, is one of my favorite scenes in the book. You've already read it, but, like all great art, you'll probably want to experience it again. So, with love, here you go. It was clear and frosty. Above the dirty, ill-lit streets, above the black roofs stretched the dark, starry sky. Only looking up at the sky did Pierre cease to feel how sordid and humiliating were all mundane things compared with the heights to which his soul had just been raised. At the entrance to the Arbit Square, an immense expanse of dark, starry sky presented itself to his eyes. Almost in the center of it, surrounded and sprinkled on all sides by stars, but distinguished from them by its nearness to the earth, its white light, and its long uplifted tail, shone the enormous and brilliant comet of 1812. The comet which was said to portend all kinds of woes and the end of the world. In Pierre, however, that comet, with its long luminous tail, aroused no feeling of fear. On the contrary, he gazed joyfully, his eyes moist with tears, at this bright comet which, having traveled in its orbit with inconceivable velocity through immeasurable space, seemed suddenly, like an arrow piercing the earth, to remain fixed in a chosen spot, vigorously holding its tail erect, shining and displaying its white light amid countless other scintillating stars. It seemed to Pierre that this comet fully responded to what was passing in his own softened and uplifted soul, now blossoming into a new life. Daily Meditation. All you need is love. Lennon and McCartney. All you need is love. All right, that concludes my reading and reflection of chapter 163. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for joining me today. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can do so either by purchasing the ebook, A Year of War and Peace, becoming a patron at patreon.com, or making a one-time donation to PayPal. The links to all that are down below in the show notes. Tomorrow, we're going to be reading and reflecting on chapter 164. I hope you'll join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and others.